Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video I'm going to talk about gearing up in the first few weeks of 11.2 from the perspective of somebody who's trying to optimize their character's power level. Now there are a lot of different types of players in this game, a lot of different reasons to optimize your power level. So this video is mostly aimed at people who are interested in pushing Mythic Plus or Mythic Progression rating or both, and are expecting to be able to earn Myth Track pieces in the first few weeks from either Mythic Plus or Raid or both, and potentially be clearing Heroic Raid on the first reset, on the second reset, those kinds of things. If that's not you, some of these tips will still certainly apply if you want, but of course, it's a game, do whatever makes you happy. This is just some potential tips that might help you out this tier. Avoid making mistakes when gearing your character. So, first tip number 1, there is a breakpoint in Myth Track this time around, where you can get more value than one of the other upgrades. So take a look at these items. These are Myth 2 items, and they're eye level 710. Myth 1 items are eye level 707. Myth 3 items are 714. Myth 4 is 717. Myth 5 is 720. And Myth 6 is 723. Now, the astute, the sharp-eyed among you might notice Myth 3 here has gone up by 4 item levels from Myth 2, and all of the other jumps on this track are just 3 item level jumps. So what this means is you're actually getting 33% more bang for your buck every time you are spending Gilded Crests upgrading something from Myth 2 to Myth 3. So that might mean that it's actually correct for you to spread out your upgrades such that you're getting as many items as possible to Myth 3 instead of upgrading one item all the way to Myth 6. Now, if it's a weapon, potentially a really good piece, a high stat budget slot, that might still override the value of getting this bigger eye level jump across multiple pieces, but it's definitely something to consider if you are somebody who is lucky enough to have multiple myth pieces that you're thinking about upgrading simultaneously. But even if you don't, even if you just have one myth piece, maybe you just bring it from Myth 1 to Myth 3, and you're getting that good that jump from Myth 2 to Myth 3, right? That extra value, and then you save your other 60 Gilded Crests for a Spark Craft, right? Something like that can be a way to use this, even if you aren't lucky or loot fed and getting all that stuff. Now, it's interesting in theory. In practice, the best way to figure out what you're supposed to do with your crests is Raidbot's Top Gear sim. So if you're a DPS player, if you're a healer or a tank, yeah, good luck. But if you're a DPS player, you can go here to Raidbots. You can use the SimCraft add-on to get this string from in-game, and then paste it in here. And you can actually show each of the currencies, and it'll tell how much you have in your bags. But you can also run a sim before you actually do your stuff each week and be like, okay, I'm gonna have 90 gildeds and 90 runes or whatever. They're not all in here yet, but once they are, next week, you'll be able to set this all up and modify these currencies so that you actually have the amounts that you're planning to have that week. And then you can go through with each of your items and you can check all the different upgrade amounts here with the different amounts you can afford. So if I set this up, for instance, to have maximum of all currencies, right? Then you could set this up to compare all the different amounts that you could upgrade. But maxing all of them is not necessarily the best thing to do here. What you actually want to do is set this to the amount that you're planning to have that week, right? Like this much, for instance. And then if you choose multiple different items and you sim all the different upgrades that seem like they might be good, it will only generate combinations that keep you within your budget of however many of these you put in here. So maybe maxing out the Valor Stones is smart because you can refarm as many as you need, but then saying, putting in the right amounts of carved runes and gildeds that you have will let you optimize for this. Okay, tip number 2, don't craft into your boots slot. There are powerful boots from the Soul Hunters in Raid that have a equip effect to make the powers of your Reshi wraps 50% more frequently triggered from Mythic. This is actually weaker. It's 40% on Heroic, 30% on the normal version, and 20% from the Raid Finder version. But depending on the level of raid, like if you're a Heroic Raider even, getting these on the Heroic version, these are still going to be strong, and the Mythic version, turbo strong, 50% more frequent procs on that. So don't craft into your boots probably. You're also not crafting into your cloak. You're also not crafting into 4 of your 5 tier slots. You're also probably not crafting into your belt, at least at the start here with this disc, although maybe long-term you will. So, and then if you're trying to craft, certain embellishments, you don't have an awful lot of spots left. So there's a pretty good chance you're going to be crafting into something like bracers and a weapon over these first couple of weeks. A lot of classes, I think, are planning to do that, or potentially into some jewelry, depending on which embellishments you're trying to use. Something like a Binding of Binding, if you are a tank or a healer, could potentially actually be really good. An Aug Evoker, all of those things would go really well into those slots. Or maybe even something like gloves for one of your off-tier slots. Could be a place to put a crafted piece into. So yeah, pretty restrictive crafting this time around. But yeah, definitely don't craft into cloak. Probably don't craft into boots if you have any designs on getting yourself any of these. And then the other slots, as we talked about. Yeah, so pretty restrictive where you're going to craft this tier. Now, speaking of crafting, let's talk about when to use your spark and how. So you have one spark and another half spark here on the 12th. And then you'll have your second full spark on the 19th. Now, if you can use a two-hander, and you can craft a two-hander using 2 sparks, you still only use the 60 Gilded Crests to do that. So it's very efficient for your Gilded Crests to use it on a two-handed weapon craft here on the 19th. Of course, that requires multiple things. That requires playing without a crafted piece here on the week of the 12th. And then also requires you playing without a high item level second embellishment until September 2nd. So those might be 2 things that you're not happy about, and you might not want to decide to do that. The other thing is, if you're a caster, there is a 2-set with this Void Glass Spire or other weapons, the Void Glass Crest and the Void Glass Sovereign's Blade, which actually come off the later bosses. But if you're interested in those, on Mythic, these bosses are probably going to be really hard to kill, take a while. But killing something like Soulbinder and Azindri, a lot of guilds will be maybe able to kill this in the first couple of weeks and get this Void Glass Spire onto either casters or into your Great Vaults as casters. So you may want to potentially not craft into the weapon slot if you are angling for this instead. If you're something like a two-handed Agi user, a Guardian Druid or a Feral Druid or Serve Hunter, then that consideration doesn't exist because this entire Shards of the Void set is only for intellect weapon users, so only something to really worry about then. If you're one of those people, like one of the Agi or Strength two-handed potential users, it's probably pretty safe to aim for, crafting a weapon with Ascension on it if you don't get a Mythtrack weapon by the second reset. That's probably a very good power spike for yourself that you can land there. Your mileage may vary. Check with your Wowhead guide, with your trusted streamer of your spec, if that's something that makes sense for your spec to do, but that's going to be a very common play pattern over these first couple of weeks. Speaking of common play patterns, let's just talk really quickly about each crest and the rules for using them. So this is assuming you can farm plus 10 keys at some point in these first few weeks. And if you can do that, then plus 10 gives hero 3 out of 6, which means you shouldn't use Ruined Crests to upgrade any item from hero 1 to hero 2, or from hero 2 to hero 3, because you can earn those crests effectively for free by earning that item from a Mythic plus 10 run. So do not use Ruined Crests on anything except for sending items from hero 3 to hero 4 if you want to be fully efficient. And if you do that, you should be able to outgrow the need of Ruined Crests by the second week here, even if you don't get any, hero 4 or Mythtrack loot from your raid at all, because 2 of your slots are already spoken for here with the Reshi Wraps and the disc, right? And then your other slots, you should be able to have enough upgrades that because you only need 15 runes to bring each slot from the point where it no longer needs Ruined Crests by doing it this way. So that's the rule for Ruined Crests. Do not use Ruined Crests except for sending items on that step from hero 3 to hero 4, which I guess is also the step from champion 7 to champion 8. But of course, the only way you'd have gotten there is if you upgraded up to that point. So yeah, you have one good use of hero crests per slot if you can farm those plus 10 keys in the first few weeks. Obviously, if you can't do that, disregard this advice and do whatever you want with your Ruined Crests. You can follow the sort of general rules for most upgrades, which is try and upgrade weapons, chest pieces, high budget slots like shoulders, helmet, chest piece, legs, as a higher priority than upgrading, bracers, belts, the disc for the first few weeks for pretty much everybody, gloves, those kind of things that are lower stat budget slots. Carved crests, on the other hand, if you are somebody who can farm, it doesn't even have to be plus 10 keys, but if you can just farm I think it's like +7, +6 keys, then your carved crests are basically free to use however you want. In fact, I've already sent some of my carved crests here before the first week even started on stuff like a warglaive, some pants. Use your carved crests however you want on whatever short-term upgrades you've got. This Sephorian pacemaker, just use your carved crests. They are a resource that you will not need if you can farm the gear that is higher than Carved Crest upgrade 2 anyways, right? So Carved Crests, free permit to use on whatever you want. Maybe don't use them on bracers or whatever early until you have outgrown them. But throw them on to whatever items like, oh, hey, that would give me a good upgrade today. If you can make day 1 a little bit easier by using some Carved Crests, day 2 a little bit easier by using some Carved Crests, go ahead. Runed Crests, only use on the Hero 3 to 4 thing. And Gilded Crests, you should be very precious with. Your Gilded Crests, you should be really thinking about how the best use is for them, because even if you only get a myth piece from your vault once per week, even still, you are going to have 2 sparks. Like by the week of the 19th, you're going to have 1 myth piece from your vault, unless you're really unlucky and you have you see 3 bad trinkets or whatever from your vault, and you're going to have 2 sparks to use, which both can potentially use 60 Gilded Crests, although, again, if you make a 2-hander, you can save some there. So it's very easy to throw some Gilded Crests in the first few weeks, and then, you get handed a piece of myth loot from raid one of these weeks, and also one from your vault, and all of a sudden you have not enough Gilded Crests for however many you actually want to spend that week. So don't use Gilded Crests unless it's a solid value upgrade on something like, weapons, chest pieces, those sorts of slots that are really high value. Those are good places where you should use your Gilded Crests, and you should try to avoid using the Gilded Crests to jump items from Hero 4 to Hero 5, because when you later get a myth piece in that slot, then you are losing out on efficiency, right? You would have gotten those Gilded Crests for free. If, however, you have, nothing else to do it on, and you're like, okay, I have this hero weapon, I may as well take it from Hero 4 to Hero 6, yeah, go for it. But, know that you are basically sacrificing some efficiency for some short-term benefit. Now, that might not be something that actually is true for you if you weren't going to have a good use for those Gildeds at all anyways. But if you are somebody who can be farming, 8 plus 10 keys per week and potentially be killing some Mythic Raid bosses, then you should try to avoid sending Gildeds into hero track items until, unless you really, unless it's a really, really good use of it, or unless you're, fighting Mythic Dimensius and you're like, okay, I've got 30 extra Gilded Crests, let me use them to the best extent that I can. Those sorts of things are a decision that there is at some point it becomes right to just use your last ones and get that power spike to get over the finish line. Okay, so those are the rules for our different crest use. Again, highly conditional depending on the type of playstyle that you have, whether you're able to earn that Hero 3 loot, whether you're able to earn Myth Track loot beyond just your vault or even from your vault at all. Those are the thoughts there. The other final point here is just be aware that given these rules, Champion Track and Hero Track loot of certain types is actually very similar. Tier pieces, for instance. Champion tier gloves and Hero tier gloves are functionally identical for players that are of the type I've described here, where you are, like, you've earned Mythic Plus Hero 3 gloves, so you can upgrade to Champion 7 or to Hero 3 for any tier gloves that you drop. And then either way, you can use those Runed Crests once to bring it up to either Champion 8 or Hero 4. And then whether it's Hero or not, you wouldn't want to use the Runed Crests to bring it up to Hero 5 or Hero 6. So Champion 8 and Hero 4 loot is very similar in a lot of slots. Same goes for trinkets. If there's a trinket that you want from M+, you can farm that specific trinket from +2s and just farm those +2s over and over again until you get it to drop on the Champion Track, and then upgrade it all the way up to Champion 8, which is the same as Hero 4 anyways. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that until you actually earned the ability to upgrade to Champion 7 for free, right? You wouldn't want to use Runed Crests taking it from Champion 4 to Champion 7, because that would be a bad use of Runed Crests. But once you've earned that right, which can be with a garbage trinket, right? You can drop a bad trinket that lets you then upgrade your good trinket that is on the Champion Track for free. So look for spots where there's a knee-jerk reaction that I've seen from a lot of players to farm a key that has something they need and to farm +10s of that key, Obviously, if you need that to fill your vault, that's great. But in a lot of cases, you've got your 8 keys for the week anyways. Once that's happened, you should farm +2s and just farm that item on the champion track because it'll be faster and easier, and the champion track is identical to the hero track for the purposes of that item for you. So think about whether that's true for any item that you're farming. This also is true for tier out of the raid, right? If you get a normal raid tier gloves versus heroic raid tier gloves, in a lot of cases, those items are going to be exactly the same value for this sort of Mythic Raider person that I'm describing here. Somebody who is going to earn the ability to upgrade both of them to the same item level for the exact same amount of crests and is not going to want to spend a gilded crest on them anyways. Of course, again, a lot of caveats here. This depends on the type of player that you are. So for a lot of players, that's not going to be true. But specifically for high-end players, that is something that you should be very much thinking about. Okay, that is it for my video here. Hope you've enjoyed. I hope this helped. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions. I tried to explain certain different conditions that they might meet here, but obviously every player has slightly different conditions for how they're playing these first few weeks. So if you have specific questions, feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer if I can, although I'm going to be pretty busy for the next few weeks, so I'm lying. I'm not going to read the comments. Good luck out there. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.